The silence in the kitchen was so heavy I could feel it pressing against my eardrums, a physical weight that made the very air feel thick and impossible to breathe. I looked at the pregnancy test sitting on the cold granite counter, the 2 pink lines mocking the 20 years of protection I had built around my daughter. Lily was 19, but cognitively she lived in a world of cartoons, coloring books, and the simple joy of watching birds in the garden. She used a wheelchair because of a degenerative muscular condition that made her body as fragile as her mind was innocent. The idea that someone had entered her room, her sanctuary, and done this made my stomach turn with a physical, oily revulsion. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a violation of the most vulnerable soul I knew. My hands shook so hard I had to grip the edge of the sink to keep from collapsing, the metal cold against my palms. I felt a sharp, jagged pain in my chest, the kind that tells you your life has just been divided into before and after. There was no going back. Someone had stolen her innocence while I was sleeping just down the hall, and the realization that I had failed to protect her felt like a slow-acting poison in my veins. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring at those lines. My mind raced through the logistics, the sheer impossibility of it. Lily was never alone. We lived like a fortress, a high-walled manor designed specifically for her comfort and safety. I thought of the morning nurse, Clara, a woman who had been with us for 6 years and treated Lily like her own. I thought of Simon, the physical therapist who had a daughter of his own. And then there was David, my husband, the man who had stayed when every other father we knew in the support groups had walked away. David was a man of precision. He was a high-level CPA who managed the estates of the city's elite. He was organized, calm, and seemingly devoted. When the doctors first told us about Lily's condition, I had crumbled, but David had simply opened his laptop and started a spreadsheet. He built the ramps, he vetted the medical staff. He was the one who handled the complicated trusts my father had left behind, a fortune tied specifically to Lily's well-being and the continuation of our family line. "Mommy, are you playing a game?" Lily's voice drifted from the living room, light and airy. I quickly swiped the test into my pocket, my heart hammering a frantic, irregular rhythm against my ribs. I walked into the room, forcing my face into a mask of normalcy. She was sitting in her motorized chair, her blonde hair caught in the afternoon sun, carefully lining up her stuffed animals by color. Blue bear, blue mabbit, blue elephant. "No game, honey," I said, my voice sounding thin and brittle to my own ears. "I was just checking the mail." I sat on the floor next to her, watching her small, soft hands move. She looked so peaceful. The rage inside me was a quiet, burning thing. I needed to know who had done this, but I was terrified of the answer. If it was one of the staff, I could call the police. But if it was something else, if the rot was inside the walls... "Lily," I whispered, reaching out to stroke her hair. She tilted her head, giving me that wide, trusting smile that usually melted my heart. Today, it broke it. Has anyone been playing new games with you lately? Someone who touched you when you were supposed to be sleeping?" She didn't look up from her animals. "No, Mommy, everyone is nice. Daddy says I'm his princess. The trainers give me stickers for my stretches." I felt a slight chill. Did he give you any new vitamins lately, the ones that make you sleepy?" "The special vitamin game," she chirped, finally looking at me. "He says it makes me strong like a superhero, but it's a secret. Secrets are for surprises like birthdays." The room seemed to tilt. The special vitamin game. David had been insisting on taking the late-night shifts for months. He said I looked haggard, that I needed my beauty sleep, that he wanted to bond with her. I had been so grateful. I had kissed him and told him he was the best father in the world. I had slept soundly while my husband was in our daughter's room playing games with sedatives. I waited until I heard the heavy groan of the garage door signaling David's departure for his Saturday afternoon golf game. He waved at me through the window, a casual, confident gesture. I watched his SUV disappear down the driveway, and the moment he was gone, the air left my lungs in a sob. I didn't have time to cry. I needed the truth. I walked toward his home office. The door was heavy oak, usually locked tight. David guarded his workspace with a ferocity that I had always attributed to client confidentiality. But today, in his rush, or perhaps in his arrogance, the door wasn't fully latched.
The office was a tomb of high-gloss wood and cold metal. I sat at his desk, my breath hitching in my chest. David's laptop was there, a thin silver sliver of power. I opened it, my fingers trembling as I typed the password, the date we brought Lily home from the hospital. He used our daughter's milestones as his keys. It made me sick. I expected to find the dark side of the internet. I expected the kinds of things you see in police procedurals. But what I found was far more terrifying because of its sheer, cold rationality. David hadn't acted out of a twisted impulse. He had acted out of a calculation. There was a folder buried 3 levels deep in his family directory, titled Project Continuity. I opened the primary file. It was a massive spreadsheet. One column listed trust liquidation dates. Another was labeled Biological Heir Requirements. I felt the blood drain from my face as I read the legal footnotes he had compiled. My father's trust was worth nearly $40 million. It was designed to provide for Lily's every need, but it had a death clause. If Lily died without a child, the entire remaining balance would be transferred to a charitable foundation for muscular dystrophy. David had spent years watching that money. He had seen it as his money, and he had realized that if Lily remained the last of the line, he would be out on the street the moment she took her last breath. I scrolled through his emails. There were chains with offshore pharmaceutical companies. Order confirmed, in-home insemination kit, instructional manual, hormone cycle regulation for nonverbal subjects. I leaned back, my head spinning. He hadn't just been sleeping in her room. He had been a medical technician, treating his own daughter like a breeding animal in a lab. He had been timing her cycles, administering special vitamins that were actually sedatives and hormone boosters, and performing procedures on her while she was unconscious. He had researched high IQ anonymous donors to ensure the resulting child would be a viable trustee. He didn't see a girl. He saw a loophole. He saw a way to keep the manor, the cars, and the lifestyle he felt he deserved. The internal monologue in my head was screaming, a high-pitched sound of pure, unadulterated betrayal. I thought of every dinner we'd had, every time he'd hugged me and told me we were in this together. He wasn't my partner. He was a predator who had been farming our family for years. The reflective pause that followed was even more painful. I realized that my own desire for things to be okay had made me a perfect victim. I wanted to believe David was a hero, so I ignored the way he looked at the bank statements with more love than he looked at his child. I ignored the way he distanced himself from Lily's actual personality while obsessing over her medical data. I had been a silent accomplice in my own daughter's violation because I was too afraid to look behind the curtain. I dug deeper into the scent folder. He had contacted a private clinic in Switzerland inquiring about post-birth guardianship transfers. He was planning to take the child away the moment it was born, likely placing it with a paid surrogate or a distant relative he could control, leaving Lily to continue her quiet, oblivious existence while he managed the billions attached to the new heir. He had calculated the cost of her care versus the projected interest on the trust. He had even factored in the legal fees for defending the estate against me should I ever find out. He had planned for my eventual death or displacement. He had thought of everything except the fact that he was destroying the only people who ever truly loved him. I heard the front door open. David was back early. The heavy thud of his golf bag in the mudroom echoed through the house like a drumbeat of doom. I didn't close the laptop. I didn't move. I sat there in the dim light of the office, the spreadsheets of Project Continuity glowing on the screen like a neon confession. The door pushed open, and David stepped in. He looked tan, relaxed, and utterly content. When he saw me sitting in his chair, his expression didn't shift into guilt. It shifted into a mild, condescending annoyance. "Sarah, you know I don't like people messing with my filing system. It's a mess in here as it is." "Is that what this is, David? A filing system?" I pointed at the screen. My voice was a whisper, but it carried the weight of a death sentence. "You drugged our daughter. You performed medical procedures on her without her knowledge. You turned her into a laboratory animal for a trust fund." He didn't flinch. He walked over to the desk, set his keys down, and looked at the monitor. A small, thin smile touched his lips, the smile of a man who had already rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times. "I am securing her future, Sarah. Don't be so dramatic. Do you have any idea what the tax implications would be if that trust dissolved?
Do you know what kind of facility she would end up in if we couldn't afford this house? I'm the only one in this family with the vision to see 10 years down the line. She's a human being, I screamed, standing up so fast the chair hit the wall behind me. She's your daughter. How could you look at her? How could you look at that sweet, innocent girl and see a loophole? I see a way to keep her safe, he said, his voice dropping into that low, manipulative tone he used to win arguments. She doesn't know. She's happy. She thinks she's getting extra vitamins. And when the baby comes, we'll have a nanny. She'll have a playmate.
It's a perfect solution. You're just reacting emotionally because you don't understand the legal stakes. I understand that you're a monster, I said, my chest heaving. I understand that you committed a felony, multiple felonies. David stepped closer, his shadow falling over me. And who are you going to tell? If you call the police, the trust is flagged. It's frozen immediately. We lose the caregivers, we lose the house. Lily's life becomes a series of sterile hospital rooms and overworked state employees. Is that the moral choice, Sarah? To ruin her life to satisfy your outrage? He thought he had me trapped. He thought my love for Lily was a chain he could use to pull me into his crime. He lived in a world of numbers, where everything could be balanced if you just moved the columns around. But he forgot that I wasn't a spreadsheet. I was a mother. I looked at him, and for the first time in 20 years, I didn't see a husband. I saw a stranger who had been wearing my husband's skin. I saw the way he gripped the edge of the desk, his knuckles white, not out of fear for Lily, but out of fear for his continuity. He wasn't worried about her body or her mind. He was worried about his access to the vault. You really think I'd choose the money over her? I asked. You think I'm like you? I think you're practical, he said, his eyes narrowing. I think you like having a gardener and a heated pool. I think you like the fact that Lily has the best doctors in the world. All of that goes away the second you open your mouth. So sit down, let me delete these files, and we can go back to being a family. I'll even take you to that resort in Maui you wanted to visit. The sheer audacity of the bribe made the world go cold. He thought my silence was for sale for a vacation. He thought he could buy my daughter's dignity with a heated pool.
I already sent the backup to my lawyer, David, I said, my voice sounding like cold stone. It didn't shake. I was surprised by that. After years of being managed and handled by him, I finally had a voice that belonged entirely to me. And the police are already in the driveway. I called them the moment I heard your car. They aren't coming for a consultation. They're coming for you. The arrest was a quiet, clinical affair. I had prepared for a scene, for shouting, for the neighbors to press their faces against the glass of their own mansions. But David, ever the pragmatist, simply stood up, adjusted his silk tie, and allowed them to lead him out. I made sure Lily was in the sunroom with her noise-canceling headphones on, lost in a movie about a magical forest. She didn't see the handcuffs. She didn't see the man she called Daddy being led away in a crisp gray suit that I had ironed for him just that morning. As the cruiser pulled away, the silence that settled over the manor wasn't peaceful. It was hollow. It was the sound of a 20-year life collapsing in real time, the foundation of our family turning to dust. The legal battle that followed was a grueling 2-year marathon that stripped me of everything but my soul. David was right about one thing. The financial fallout was total. The charitable foundation, tipped off by the scandal, filed an immediate injunction against the Sterling Family Trust. They argued that because the heir was conceived through criminal fraud and a violation of the primary beneficiary, the trust's conditions had been irreparably breached. Every bank account I relied on was frozen within 48 hours. I sat in mahogany-paneled courtrooms while lawyers in $3,000 shoes discussed my daughter's biological viability as if she were a piece of livestock or a line item on a balance sheet. I watched David sitting at the defense table, scribbling notes on a legal pad, still looking for a loophole, still convinced he was the smartest person in the room. He never once looked at me with regret. He only looked at the judge with the eyes of a man who had lost a high-stakes bet and was looking for a way to double down. The final audit was the most painful part of the process. I had to sit with a court-appointed liquidator and go through every asset we owned. I watched the moving trucks carry away the Persian rugs, the grand piano nobody played, and the custom furniture David had bought to impress people we didn't even like. I had to sell my engagement ring, a $5 reminder of a lie, to pay for Lily's specialized physical therapy. I sold my car to cover the deposit on a cramped 2-bedroom apartment that was smaller than our old master closet. But the audit wasn't just about the money. It was about the inventory of my own life. I realized that for 2 decades, I had traded my intuition for comfort. I had allowed David to build a world around me where I didn't have to think, didn't have to worry, and didn't have to look too closely at the man beside me. I felt a deep, reflected shame that sat in my gut like lead. How many nights had I kissed him goodnight while he was planning to violate our daughter? How many times had I thanked him for his patience when he was really just calculating his next move?
The realization hit me one rainy afternoon in our new, small home. The walls were thin enough that I could hear the neighbor's television, and the floorboards creaked under my feet. There was no gardener, no chef, no team of nurses. It was just me. I was exhausted. My back ached from lifting Lily without a motorized hoist, and I was terrified of how I would pay the next month's rent. Lily was sitting by the window, watching the rain hit the glass. She looked up at me, and for the first time in years, her eyes were completely clear. There was no sedative haze, no special vitamin fog. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice tiny and sweet, "the bad game is over, right? No more secrets?" I felt a sob catch in my throat, a jagged piece of ice finally melting. I knelt beside her chair and took her hands. They were warm and real. "No more games, baby. No more secrets. Just us. We might not have the big house anymore, but nobody is ever going to hurt you again. I promise." She smiled, a genuine, radiant expression that David could never have factored into a spreadsheet. "I like the small house, Mommy. It smells like cookies, not medicine." That was the moment I won. David is serving a 15-year sentence for aggravated assault and medical fraud. He still sends letters from the prison library, typed on an old machine. They are filled with diagrams and financial projections on how we can sue the foundation to get the trust back. He still thinks the tragedy is the loss of the $40 million. He spends his days trying to solve the equation of his own greed, convinced that if he just finds the right legal precedent, he can reclaim his palace. He doesn't realize the tragedy was him. He doesn't realize that a father who treats his child as an asset has already lost everything worth having. I don't open the letters anymore. I don't need his vision for the future. I have my own. I work 2 jobs now, one as a remote bookkeeper and one doing data entry at night. It's a far cry from the life of a socialite, but every dollar I earn is honest. Every night when I tuck Lily in, I know exactly what she has eaten, exactly who has touched her, and exactly how safe she is. I've learned that there is a specific kind of wealth that doesn't show up on a bank statement. It's the wealth of a clear conscience. It's the fragrance of a home that isn't built on a lie. People in our old circle whisper about us. They call me the woman who threw it all away. They see the stinky girl in her cheap clothes and think I'm a failure, but they are looking at the wrong ledger. When I look at Lily now, I don't see a loophole or a trust fund requirement. I see a girl who finally has a mother who is fully awake. I am no longer the wife of a saint. I am a woman who burned down a kingdom to save a soul. The legacy isn't the money. The legacy is the fact that when Lily wakes up in the middle of the night, she isn't afraid of the shadows. And that is an account that David, with all his brilliance and all his numbers, could never even begin to comprehend. We are broke, we are tired, but for the first time in my life, we are truly, undeniably free.